The Hearing, a legal podcast from Thomson Reuters.
I would be reading an article. I would get really interested and excited in some odd little bit of law, and then I would just phone up Kaley and say, I've got really, really interested in this niche, weird little bit of law, or this person who's written this article. Is there any chance that you could just find them and let me talk to them about it for an hour?
Honestly, without exaggeration, it has been one of the greatest joys of my profession to do something like this. It was so fascinating to explore areas of law I hadn't practiced in or studied at law school or university, and opening another window in my legal world. I just found that so interesting.
Hello and welcome to this special episode of The Hearing. As you may have heard, this is actually our final episode. After a 7.5-year run, we've decided to bring the podcast to a close so we can focus on some new projects here at Thomson Reuters. And we want to do something a bit different and special for our last show. I'm sure you're wondering who on earth this is speaking. This is an unfamiliar voice to you. My name is Ben Clayton, and together with Kaley Botting, who you're going to hear from in a moment, and with the help of some other colleagues, we actually launched The Hearing in 2018. And since then, aside from the odd exception, I've edited the following 180 plus episodes. And I'm joined today by the rest of the Hearing team, so I'm going to let them introduce themselves.
The Hearing.
Hi, I'm Kaley, maybe another stranger to a lot of our listeners. I am, along with Ben, I have been the producer for the podcast for the vast majority of its episodes since inception, minus 2 maternity leaves, working with our hosts to come up with the best guests and ideas for you all.
I'm Yasmin. I'm one of the hosts of The Hearing. I've been a host, I was 7 months pregnant with my son, who's now 5.5, so you can work out how long I've been doing this. Outside of that, of hosting, I'm the founder of Diverse Matters, which is a training consultancy specialising in disability inclusion. And I'm also a former lawyer as well.
Hi, it's Janelle Wrigley here, another host of The Hearing since about 2023. And outside of hosting The Hearing, I am on the antitrust and competition team at Practical Law, which is part of Thomson Reuters.
I'm Becky Annison. I've been a host, I can't believe it now, for about 6 years on The Hearing, which has been amazing. And the rest of the time, I'm the head of supply chains at the Chancery Lane Project, which is a legal climate change charity.
Hi, I'm Teneé Frazier. I'm also a host with The Hearing, and I have been on board since about 2024. I'm also a senior specialist legal editor with Practical Law, where I practice in state and local government.
Hello, I'm Christina. Lynn. I'm another unfamiliar voice. I'm one of the producers on The Hearing. I joined recently, but have been able to pack quite a few entertaining and interesting guests into the last few months while I helped in the background.
Oh, thank you, everybody. So, as this is our final episode, we thought it would be fun to give you a peek under the hood of The Hearing. Now, without question, The Hearing has evolved considerably since it all began. So let's start with some background. Kaley, what can you tell us about the journey we've been on and how things have changed?
It's hard to think back to when we first started. We were being asked, Ben and I have a video background, and we were being asked why we weren't doing a podcast. And actually, if you looked at data at the time, podcasts had a bit of a slump, but we really thought there was something in it, and we really thought, well, the people we're meeting in the video world, there were so many stories we weren't quite capturing because they were more conversational, more interesting, but not what lawyers needed to know to do their job, just what they were interested in. And The Hearing was born, basically. It came from there. We found a home for all of these super interesting stories that we were coming across the industry.
And it's fair to say, isn't it, that it's changed a lot, hasn't it, since we began? When we first started recording, the recordings would happen face to face, and I know that's all changed, which had a much bigger impact on you than me.
Yeah. I talk about that slump. COVID happened and podcasts just went astronomically popular again. And we had to really quickly pivot from, I was sort of, sounds silly now when you think about it. I was getting taxis around town. I was flying out to Washington, DC. I was in New York doing a podcast to do these all in person. And then just really quickly pivoted. I think the first time we started doing these online, we were using something that was using people's phones a lot more than laptops, Clean Feed. And obviously we then just, as everyone who's on social media knows, you can record a podcast anywhere in the world now.
So we've obviously got our 4 current hosts with us now recording this episode. Do you want to say anything about the previous hosts?
Yeah, it was a very obvious choice when we started this again in a pre-COVID world. Kevin Poulter was someone we'd worked with on video, someone we just knew would be the right person to be having some of the conversations. An evolution we have had is with the kind of guests we have as well, because again, a lot of people will remember budgets for in-person events were massive before COVID, and we were working with really big, like basically legal celebrities, and Kevin just was such a great personality to be having those chats. Then we had Joe Rosinski as well. His legal tech background. He was just a fantastic TR colleague who again was just, you see him speak on stage and you knew that he was right. And we had Lauren Sobel and Jen Thibodeau after that, and they were again fantastic US colleagues as we moved across the pond. Everyone sort of bringing their own stories and their own different that bring their backgrounds, bringing these sort of new fantastic avenues of content that have been great to listen to as a producer over the years.
Yeah, such a lovely broad range of hosts has enabled us to cover so many angles of the legal industry. As this is a reflective episode, I'm now going to invite the rest of you to share any memorable or standout moments. So let's start with you, Becky.
Yeah, this is really interesting. And it was so hard thinking about this because I've had so many amazing guests that I've been so privileged to speak to. But I think the standout episode for me was probably episode 120, redundancies, layoffs and cutbacks. Now, you might think, Becky, why didn't you choose a climate change one? And that's a really good question. And I think it's just because this one about redundancies was so interesting and so powerful. And it was not an area I knew a lot about. So this was a cross-examination episode. Do you remember those back in the day?
Yeah, of course.
And we had pulled it together because basically I had been reading a lot of newspaper articles about a huge amount of layoffs that were happening in the tech industry, and they all seemed to be happening around about the same time. This was when Twitter was shedding, I think Elon Musk had just bought Twitter, now X, and they were shedding sort of tens of thousands of roles really fast. But it wasn't just Twitter. My recollection is that Facebook were doing the same, and a couple of other really big tech companies were just shedding huge amounts of staff. And obviously it was a real tragedy, really sad, all those people losing their jobs. But what caught my eye in all of the discussion that I was reading about it was, obviously, I'm based in the UK, and the employment law that I am familiar with is UK employment law. And I was reading these newspaper articles and thinking, how on earth are they able to do all of this? Because under UK employment law, you have a process that you have to follow. So I kind of came to Kaley and said, these big redundancies are happening. They are originating from US tech firms, but they're not just happening in the US. They're happening globally, because these are massive global companies. They're happening in the UK, Ireland, France. Twitter staff are being made redundant in all of these locations. How do you do a big redundancy exercise and manage all of the competing legal jurisdictions? Because the rights that somebody would have in Ireland is vastly different from the rights that somebody would have in the US. And Kaley was amazing. She helped me pull together an amazing slate of expert guests who were expert in all these different jurisdictions. We had this fascinating episode where we were comparing and contrasting different employment laws across the jurisdictions. But the reason this was a standout episode is because I knew that a lot of employment contracts in the US were at will, and that there weren't as many rights as there were in the UK. But what I didn't know was that in France, you have incredibly strict redundancy conditions on corporates. And if you don't follow them, it can mean criminal prosecutions. And I think for me, that was just, I know that different jurisdictions across the world happen, and I know that different laws exist, but the wild difference between an at-will termination for employment, this is really, really geeky and legal, I'm so sorry, but the difference between an at-will termination and is incredibly strict process that you have to follow to the letter, which goes on for months and months and months. And if you get bits of it wrong, you're open to criminal prosecution in France. That, to me, was like a standout moment for me. I'm a lawyer. I've been a lawyer maybe getting on for, I hate to say it, over 20 years now, I think. But that, for me, was that moment of, gosh, there's so much about the law that is mind-blowing, even for me. This was something which hadn't even been on my radar, and that's why I always remember it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so good, isn't it? Like one of the beauties of working on this podcast is that, well, certainly for me, I just keep learning. It's such an amazing way to stay abreast of the things that are changing and the differences are in the legal industry. How about you, Janelle? Any standout moments for you?
Yeah, I think for me, there's a lot, and I loved that episode too, Becky, and I think on the similar theme of kind of episodes we had that explored some of those comparative differences between jurisdictions or similarities, I really loved the 2-episode series that you and I did focusing on jury nullification. I interviewed Professor Glenn Reynolds. You talked to Richard Vogler. Talking about this concept that exists. We got it from the UK, but where a jury can basically, even if they think somebody committed a crime or if they did the deed, they can still choose to acquit for all kinds of any reason at all, really. Maybe they disagree with the prosecution. Maybe they think the law is unfair. So we were kind of interested in this issue. We got excited about it. And the reason it stands out to me now is we didn't know at the time that, at least in the U.S., the issue of jury nullification has become a lot more salient in the last, under the current administration, where there's a lot of controversial prosecutions happening. The Department of Justice is doing some things that are certainly making a lot of headlines. So this idea has kind of come back, become more prominent, I think, in the news. And also, Professor Reynolds and I in that episode had a bit of a conversation as well, just about prosecutorial power and just the breadth and the complexity of the federal criminal body of law at this point, where we talk about how, if the government decides they don't like you and wants to find a crime to charge you with, they probably can find one. There's just so many kind of vague and complex federal criminal statutes out there. And again, with some of these more controversial things that are going on in the news right now, you can see some of that maybe playing out. So it's a really interesting series of episodes. The U.S. episode in particular, if you're interested in some of those issues that are going on right now, I think is worth going back and checking out.
Yeah, I completely agree. I was thinking about those episodes recently, actually, because you're quite right. They've become more poignant, if that's the right word to describe them now, than they seemed at the time, I think. How about you, Yasmin? Have you got any sort of moments to share?
Absolutely. Well, I'm so sad. I counted how many episodes I recorded as a host, and 40. I couldn't believe it.
Wow.
And like Becky, I found it quite difficult to find the ones that really stood out for me, but I managed to. And there are 2 episodes I want to highlight. It's because of the legal personalities, really. So episode 69 was Lady Hale. I don't think I could fail to mention her. I mean, for our US colleagues, if you're not familiar, she's the former president of the UK Supreme Court, and she was the first woman actually who had that top judicial post in the UK. I had imposter syndrome when I was interviewing her. I was very nervous. I remember that, thinking, how have I got to this position where I'm actually interviewing Lady Hale? So it's amazing. But we talked about her career and the landmark judgments she's proud of. The one that stuck out for me was the prorogation case, which was about she ruled that the UK's government suspension of Parliament was unlawful. And so that was protecting parliamentary sovereignty and checked executive power during Brexit. So that was a massive case, involved a lot of discussion in the media about that. And the second person I wanted to mention was Liam Walker KC. If you recall, this was episode 93. We had a mini series on a jury system, and he was defending one of the Colston Four. Now, if this rings any bells, the Colston Four, they were acquitted by a jury after pulling down the Edward Colston statue during the BLM Black Lives Matter protest. And he was a very cool character. He was, I would describe him as very unconventional lawyer, as in he has been described as the man of the people. And I think that's why he got on so well with the defendants. He was just one of them. He was able to be very relatable, and he was so laid back in the interview. I just loved everything about him, his style, the way he communicated. He was so accessible, relatable, such a great storyteller as well. And he was fascinating to speak to. And I remember coming out of my office buzzing after that interview. I just felt so privileged to interview, I think, two people who will be on the history books, definitely the cases that they're involved with. And that's been one of the honours, really, to be able to talk to personalities that are part of the legal system and have massive influence on the British justice system. So, yeah, those are two standout moments for me.
Yeah, that's so true. There's some true legends, aren't there, in the lineup of guests that we've had over the years. How about you, Teneé? What any memorable moments you want to share?
Yes, and mine have to do with the issue of mental health in the legal community. We did a 2-part series on that, and I had the opportunity to chat with Kent Halkett from the Tennessee Alliance for Legal Services, and he spoke about how his experience with mental health and how it has shaped him and his quest to aid other attorneys. And then I had the opportunity to chat with Carrie Lawler from the Workplace Collective, who is also a psychotherapist and the director of the Workplace Collective. And she mentioned some of the tools that we can utilize in order to maintain our mental health. But I think the most memorable part of the interview came when Kent gave us a staggering statistic saying that over 79% of attorneys feel like this profession has negatively impacted their mental health. And I just found that to be astonishing. And then the next area that I really appreciated was when Carrie mentioned self-care. And it was towards the ending of our conversation, but she mentioned how self-care was such a pivotal practice in maintaining our mental health. But I felt like it begged the question of, what is self-care? What does that look like? And I asked her that, and she went in to describe what was self-care and just an overview of things that we can do to actually practice self-care for our mental health. And so that's why I found that to be one of our most memorable episodes.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Teneé. And how about you, Kaley? Anything you want to reflect upon?
I could go into loads of detail about Sherry Blair in her Pilates outfit and Alistair Campbell in a tiny cupboard in the depths of Canary Wharf. But it was so mad to me when we'd already had a couple of people that I would consider semi-famous say yes to come on the podcast. But it was wild to me when Dave Rowntree, the drummer of Blur, said yes. And he suggested we met in Soho. And I had to scramble around. I had to find a location in Soho in the middle of summer, and he was just going to pull up in his whatever hundreds of thousands of pounds sports car out the front, maybe not a sports car, and I just lost my mind and was just so unprofessional the whole time, because I am a 90s British music fan, and we just talked about being in Blur before he became a lawyer, and I think I tell people about that episode more than others, but I tell people about loads of these episodes because they're all so cool.
Yeah.
The Hearing.
On the outside, you're a lawyer, calm and cool, but inside there's a passion to perform, a drive to be absolutely on your game. You prepare hour after hour, day after day in the pursuit of excellence, relying on superior resources, serious preparation, and total confidence. That's the advantage we give you. Be your best with Thomson Reuters Practical Law.
As allegiances are tested.
You're gambling with World War III.
And regimes fall.
Fighters and civilians continue to stream in from other parts of Syria.
No matter where the story is, Reuters World News podcast is there. We make sense of the news shaping our world and give you everything you need to know in a 10-minute podcast every weekday. I'm your host, Kim Vanell. Listen and follow wherever you get your podcasts.
So back when we started, launching a podcast was a new experience for you and I, Kaley. I think it's fair to say we've been winging it ever since.
Yeah.
With countless hurdles for us to overcome over the years. So I thought it might be fun just to share some of those experiences. So starting with you, Christina, are there any notable challenges that spring to mind for you?
I think, especially since I came on kind of after things have been going for a few years, you've worked out a lot of the kinks, but it is funny how every single recording for the most part has some challenge. So no matter how many times you've done it, whether it's sound problems or computer issues, again, all the ones I recorded were remote, which does have challenges. It's just different to interact if you're meeting a guest and you've never met in person, you've only kind of emailed, maybe had one briefing call, and then you kind of have this tight time. Everyone fits it into a small spot on their calendar, and you start up and everything seems fine, and then all of a sudden there's a loud noise or an animal in the room or construction going on outside, and you kind of have to work through it. And again, because of the remote, you don't get that personal ability to kind of have a chat beforehand. Everything over, as much as we're used to it, it's just different. It's a really different experience. And then, of course, I'm in the US and half of the hosts are in the UK, lots of guests in all kinds of other places. So we've had some really unique recording times for me, much in the pre-dawn hours. But they've all been, you've kind of learned how to make whatever you can make work in the time that you have and get as creative as you can to get the best product out. It definitely keeps you on your toes, no matter how many times you've recorded.
Yeah, that's so true what you're saying about if you schedule some time with somebody to record with them remotely, you haven't had that preamble with them to sort of get to know them, so that if there are technical issues face to face, you've already sort of warmed up with them. Whereas when it's remote, often the technical challenge might be them dropping off the call anyway, which is a super awkward thing to fix. How about you, Janelle?
Yeah, I was going to say something very similar to Christina, which is, I had all kinds of laptop challenges in various episodes, but really the time zones was something that we often had to navigate. I don't know if we set a record, Kaley, with our episode with Makalika Naholoa'a, who's in Hawaii. So I was in California, Kaley's in the UK, Makalika was in Hawaii. It's covering a pretty good span of the globe.
I don't know.
You've
I
done
had to
better?
do one at 11 o'clock. We had someone in Sydney at 7 or 8 a.m. Maybe someone listening is gonna tell me I'm getting all these times wrong, but someone was in Sydney. There was very early their time. I was late at night, like 11 o'clock. And we had Joe Rosinski was in DC, 5 p.m.
That is actually almost impossible to pull off.
Yeah,
So well done.
it was the pandemic, so I had no social life. I had no children, and just sort of just was like, it was in that sort of time where it's like, all right then, anything goes right now, doesn't it?
Yeah, but you also realize those conversations couldn't happen unless you were doing it online. So even though it's painful, the technology also makes it possible, I suppose. So.
Yeah, I'd love to have been in Hawaii.
Yes.
Like, I would love to agree with California with you.
Yeah. And then I think the other one for me was just the last episode I just recorded with Christina, where we had a wonderful guest, and she was giving her kind of closing comments. It was very moving. You could almost picture like the music swelling in the background as she wrapped up her thoughts. And then my computer just went, "You have updates that need to be installed. The laptop will now restart." And my laptop just turned off in the middle of her giving this, sort of beautiful closing comments. Thankfully, she was an absolute pro and she continued, and I came back when I could. But things like that, as you were saying, Christina, just happen all the time. And you just hope that it doesn't come through in the episodes. But
yeah, that happens a lot, doesn't it? Your computer insists on updating just at the wrong moment.
All the time.
How about you, Teneé?
Well, I have a funny story that involves Christina as well. I was preparing very intensely for this podcast, and I got online and I logged into Riverside, and I'm waiting in the waiting room for the host to accept me, and I say, she's not accepting me, so I send a Teams message, then an email to Christina, and I'm saying, hey, I'm in the waiting room, I'm ready for the podcast, and she was like, wait, it's not today, it's tomorrow. I'm like, oh my God. Yeah. And she was like, well, I'm just glad that you're a day early and not a day late, So it was kind of funny, but I nearly gave Christina a heart attack, but I was able to breathe a breath of fresh air because I had a day extra to prepare. So
yeah. That's true. Oh, so this next question is for you, host, really. As I know from our production meetings, there's really never any shortage of ideas for new guests and new topics that we should cover. So I'm curious to hear about any favourite ideas that just kept evading you for whatever reason. So let's start with you, Becky. What's the one that got away?
Sure. So this is one that I discussed quite a bit with Christina, and we were trying to get someone to come and talk about it, and we just couldn't find somebody. But it's cruises. Stay with me. So, funnily enough, I've never been on a cruise, and I don't really want to go on one. They don't really interest me as a holiday destination, but they do interest me as a lawyer. And the reason they interest me so much as a lawyer is that I'm absolutely fascinated by the idea of when you're on a cruise ship out in international waters and a crime is committed, then what? What laws apply? But more importantly, if you're on land in the US or the UK and a law is committed, we have a really clear process about who is in charge of investigating it, what powers they have, powers that are limited by acts of law. And those powers and the limitations on them have been built up over hundreds of years, working out what is it the police need to do to protect people, what limits need to be on the police's power, because I think the idea of the police is a very interesting one, isn't it? What the police are is ordinary citizens that we give additional rights to in order to fulfill a particular role for society. Like Becky, can't just go and kidnap people. But there's special exclusions for police to do that, special exclusions for how they investigate crimes. But there's obviously limits on those because we have freedoms in this country. So what fascinates me is when you take a crime that's been committed on a cruise ship, all of that work and hundreds of years of establishing precedent about what can and can't be done sort of gets thrown away. Suddenly the people investigating the crime are the cruise ship security staff in many cases, and I'm fascinated by what legal authority do they have? In whose interests are they acting? They're not officers of the court in the way that the police are. Ultimately, they're probably incentivized to serve the interests of the company who employs them. They're not trained as investigators and all of this sort of thing. And I think it's a really fascinating microcosm a study in the rule of law and policing and practice, but in this kind of slightly Wild West scenario. And so I was really keen to get someone to come along on the podcast and answer my newbie questions, if you like. What is the law? What is the process? How do they have authority? And what are the limits of that authority? And we didn't manage to find anyone to come and talk about it. And so if anybody wants to email me privately for a private conversation, because I am still absolutely fascinated and have many questions that I want to ask.
Our listeners just got to listen to how fun a production meeting with Becky is. It starts with, so I've got this idea that I just want to know about this. And then you get to listen to the really interesting idea, and then you sit and you think, right, I've now got to go phone someone who knows about cruise ship law. Hey, it's a bit behind the scenes for you, everyone.
Yeah, no, I agree, Becky. That does sound like a fascinating, I think maybe a mini series. There's so many questions there that need to be answered.
I know, right?
Yeah. How about you, Teneé? Is there a particular topic or guest that wish you'd got around to?
Yes, there is. And I really wanted to explore the case that dealt with Adriana Smith. She was an African-American woman in Georgia that was declared brain dead, but was forced to deliver a baby. And I wanted to get into the issues of women's rights, fetus rights, abortion law, medical ethics, all of the things that are surrounding that case. And not only that, but kind of delving into the area of when it comes to African American women and the healthcare system and some of the healthcare issues that they experience when seeking out care and things of that sort. But yeah, that was one of the major pivotal cases that I wanted to chat about, was Adriana Smith.
I've not heard of that story. That sounds incredible. How about you, Janelle? Is there a topic or a guest which you wish you'd got to cover?
Had I done another episode, Christina and I had been talking about, I live in an area with a lot of agriculture nearby. And so there's a lot of issues around farm workers, especially right now. And farm workers tend, some farm workers are on special visas. Some are undocumented, some are citizens, but there's a lot of legal issues around, workers' rights, living conditions, all kinds of advocacy that goes on their behalf. So I was curious to kind of learn more about some of the conditions and legal issues that farm workers face and what people are trying to do to help on that issue. So again, if somebody out there wants to pursue that, please do, and then I'll listen to the episode and learn about it. And then more broadly, Kaley and Ben may remember, like very early on when we were talking about, my ideas for the podcast, if I were to join, I had always wanted to do something. It's not really diving into a legal topic, but I'm always interested in just hearing about mistakes that people have made in their careers and getting past them, because I think as lawyers, everyone makes mistakes, but we have a profession that's so focused on perfection that I think people get really anxious about it, worry about if they can recover from having done something wrong. And even, people stress out about there's a typo in the email I sent to the partner or things like that. So I always wanted to do either ask our guests or have some kind of series where people who had successful careers just talk about something that went wrong and how everything, in the end turns out okay, usually. Although one challenge we had with that is it's not easy to get people to kind of admit to that in a public forum. So that's more something that maybe you just have to discuss at the pub over a drink. But I always kind of wanted to somehow explore that.
Yeah, I think about that idea you had all the time, because there's so many famous lawyers. Like, there's so many people we could put on this list of, the celeb lawyer. But that idea just sticks with me. And I remember we were sort of trying to work out who is going to come on, and could we make them anonymous? Right. Could we somehow distort their voice? Because we want the really juicy stories, right? And no lawyer in their right mind is going to come on and be like, yeah, I messed the case up. No,
yeah, exactly.
As much as we'd like them to.
It feels like that would fall into the category of, once we'd stop recording, that's when you would get the really juicy stuff. And you'd be like, no, why are you saying this now?
Yeah,
You should be saying this on the tape. But
Yeah.
as we all know, the guests say the best things once the recording has stopped. So working on the hearing has been such a rewarding and learning experience for me. Listening to and editing such a wide variety of insightful conversations is such a fun way for me to stay informed, as I said, about developments within the legal industry. And it's also, for me, it's been such a creatively satisfying process as well. And I'm just interested to know what you've all got out of it personally. So how about you, Teneé? What's been the key takeaway for you?
One of the key takeaways for me would be that we don't have to discuss everything. As an attorney, we live on this mantra of being very thorough, leaving no stone unturned. But you just can't get all of that information into 1 hour or 45 minutes in a podcast. So I had a discussion with Ben and we chatted about, okay, what do we really need to pull out in the episodes? And he just gave me the best answer and was like, look, just really hone in on having a evolving conversation with your guest and get into the information that your audience members want to hear. And if you focus on the who, what, when, where, and why, you'll be fine. And so that was something that just ultimately made my segments even better because I was able to just kind of let my hair down and focus on the who, what, when, where, and why.
I like it. Thank you, Teneé. How about you, Becky?
So I think what I've got out of this is something that Kaley has sort of already mentioned. And I think many people have used the word privilege in relation to this role as a host, and I can't tell you what a privilege it's been for me. And the reason is because I'm just an incredibly curious person. I think that many of the hosts might recognise that I'm a real geek about the law and about legal process. I genuinely find it really interesting. And what would always happen is that I would be reading an article, I would get really interested and excited in some odd little bit of law, and then I would just phone up Kaley and say, I've got really, really interested in this niche, weird little bit of law, or this person who's written this article. Is there any chance that you could just find them and let me talk to them about it for an hour? And genuinely, the way I experienced it was that I would have a real interest in some topic, and I would be able to message somebody and say, can you just get me an expert? And I just want to spend an hour talking to them about this thing that I'm currently interested in. And that's what would happen. And I genuinely can't believe that I got to do that for 6 years. And I'm really going to miss it, actually. It was a hugely joyful experience as somebody who is incredibly curious and geeky about the law. It's just been the most amazing time.
That is actually, an incredible. I appreciate it's usually Kaley that this falls to, but an incredible thing to be able to wish for that and make it happen. If to sort of scratch that itch.
I know, it's just fairy godmother Kaley and Christina. I'm really interested in this topic. Can you find someone who will just talk to me about it for a while? Thank you.
Oh, that's wonderful. What about you, Christina? What would you say you've got out of it?
Well, it's been just an incredible experience for me because I love the stories behind a lot of the guests. So one of my favorite questions is kind of in the beginning when people ask, how did you get into this? So kind of, again, picking out something really interesting. While the topics themselves are interesting, every individual person is so interesting. And then also getting the chance to spend time with all of the hosts who I wouldn't know otherwise, and your backgrounds and just the chats that I've gotten to have kind of off camera, off recording with all of you and what you're interested in. Everyone brings a different perspective, has different people that they might be interested in same thing, kind of to your point, Becky, when I'm reading something and I find something that I think is interesting, I think maybe one of the hosts would be interested in that. And I kind of have a chance to reach out to whichever of you might be interested in it. And so that's been really fun for me. And then Kaley and Ben showing me the ropes, how to do the production side of podcasting, something I would not have had any opportunity to really get into before. And everyone has been patient and wonderful in teaching that. So it's been just an incredible experience with so much learning in a really short amount of time, even outside of the actual content, which is obviously really, really fascinating. So it's been a great experience even in a short amount of time.
Thank you very much, Christina. And Yasmin, have there been any key takeaways for you?
Absolutely. I mean, I just feel very lucky that I could explore any topic I wanted to and any person I wanted to interview as well. So I was so fortunate to do that. And because I'm not practicing anymore in law, what it gave me was this connection with the legal profession, giving me that sense of belonging. Lawyers are an interesting bunch, I think. It just reminded me of that, how varied, complex, inspiring the legal profession really is. We're all doing so many different things, and it was so fascinating to explore areas of law I hadn't practiced in or studied at law school or university, and opening another window in my legal world. I just found that so interesting. And honestly, without exaggeration, it has been one of the greatest joys of my profession to do something like this. And it's a very sad day, but it's lovely to reflect on it as well. And I enjoyed listening to the other hosts' episodes. And weirdly, it went full circle for me, because Kevin Poulter, who was the host before me, interviewed me back in the day. And this is when that you were doing in-person interviews. He came to little flat in Wimbledon, interviewed me, and then a few years later, I had the privilege of being one of the hosts as well. So that was a surreal moment and a full circle moment. So thank you.
Oh, absolutely. So as the saying goes, all good things must come to an end. But before we close, does anyone have any Jerry Springer style final thoughts that they would like to share? How about you, Kaley?
Yeah, I guess I'm sitting listening to everyone's what they've learned. And I've grown up with it. It's been going so long. I've got met my husband and had children, and all these things have happened since we started, and I now know all these different people. I have such a amazing network, and I guess the thing that it's taught me, and it really has taught me this, I take this, I think this has now become a part of who I am. It is to just reach out to people. If you have an idea or you think people are going to be interested in something, sure, Erin Brockovich never got back to me, fine. But so many people did and really wanted to share their journeys. And I now feel like I sit, especially when I go on LinkedIn, I feel like I sit in this sort of warm bubble of legal experts. And I have so many, I would say, quite close connections now. The hosts on this call definitely are. And some guests, I speak to them semi-regularly, and it's all because of that initial "why don't you do a podcast?" ? And then I was like, yeah, I guess you should.
The Hearing.
To wrap things up, I just wanted to say thanks to each of you. I appreciate that every conversation you had was preceded by a lot of research and preparation on your parts. Thank you so much to you, to all our previous hosts, Kevin Poulter, Joe Rosinski, Jen Thibodeau, Lauren Sobel, for doing that prep and making my job so easy. Well done to Kaley and more recently Christina for persuading an endless supply of guests, without which we would have had nothing. Thanks, of course, to all those guests for letting themselves be persuaded, and especially those early guests when we still had relatively few listeners and they still got involved anyway.
A final thought then would be just a big thank you to our audience. We've had hundreds of thousands of you, and it's been really lovely knowing that we're with you as you're walking your dogs or cooking your spaghetti bolognese. We were with you in the pandemic, and to have to meet people in person that are hearing lessons has always been really exciting. So thank you from me. You don't know me, but I know you guys because I see all the data of what you've liked, what you've enjoyed over the years, and it's been fantastic.
The Hearing, a legal podcast from Thomson Reuters. To find out more, go to tr.com/The Hearing. or subscribe via iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.